So my name is Chandler Kellogg. I have a growth marketing and sales enablement agency called Hot Button IO. I previously did a sales and marketing presentation that was an overview of kind of both service categories that we offer, but this one is specifically going to be focused on sales enablement. And the purpose for this is also to give you an overview of the concept, but to kind of give you a checklist or shopping guide when you're looking for tools in this area or trying to build your team internally or potentially engaging an agency for some of these services. So the outline here, we'll go over kind of an introduction of sales enablement, what that entails, definition of it, lead generation, engagement, analytics, intelligence, deliverability, and pipeline management. So these are all things that factor into sales enablement in various capacities. So for the definition, sales enablement is the strategic process of equipping sales teams with the necessary tools, content, and training to sell products or services. So this goes into CRMs, this goes into sales playbooks. It has pretty much anything that is making your sales teams more effective other than just what they do themselves manually. So a lot of that is speeding up the process and giving tools to make your sales reps more effective or to make you more effective if you're doing all the sales yourself for your business. Ensures your team stays ahead, optimized and competitive. It equips them with the latest skills and knowledge, increases sales velocity, and that's really the key in sales enablement. Is it's getting rid of a lot of the non-value added activities, manual data entry, things like that, to make sure that your sales reps can work more efficiently, and then also as a result of that, your pipeline should increase in velocity. Part of that is providing right content at the right time, making sure you're engaging with leads when they're ready to buy, otherwise supporting them with information in their purchasing decision process if they're kind of in the research phase. So mapping that journey out and then hitting them with the right content depending on where they are in that journey. And then understanding the importance of each element and how they work cohesively to empower your team or yourself if you're one person show. So first step on there, lead generation. This is probably the step that most people are very familiar with, but they don't necessarily have a strategic view of how they're building out leads. Oftentimes, when companies are first starting out or where you haven't done a comprehensive lead generation strategy, a lot of people just buy, hundreds or thousands of leads. A lot of times these are, a trade show attendees. It can be from any number of people who are doing cold outreach to you, trying to sell you list of leads. So a lot of people start with some kind of lead list first, and they run into issues with it, stale data, with it being outdated, with difficulty of integrating it into their tools or pushing it to their CRM system. So this kind of touches on how you can be a little bit more efficient on building those lead generation lists. So contacting company search, identifying the right contacts and companies with comprehensive criteria and filtering. There are a lot of different tools in this category, but typically if you don't pay for a tool that does the entire suite, so that it does the engagement, does the outreach, it does email deliverability, which we'll touch on all that stuff later. The most basic one is contact and company search. So you'll typically have filters like location, number of employees, revenue size, and then you can get a lot more tactical, like into a company's tech stack. For example, if you're a software provider and looking to see what softwares they already use or don't use, that would be part of that filtering list. So that can get pretty advanced, and there are tools that either just do the search component and the data component, or they can have a lot of other features built in. Social prospecting, tapping into new audiences and gaining insights on those needs and behaviors. Typically, one of the ways that you can build leads from social prospecting is if you scrape post engagements and event attendees. So you could do this manually, you could do it with a number of different tools. But basically, if you're trying to build a lead list, one of the best ways to do it after you've built kind of an evergreen campaign is reaching out to people that have engaged with a piece of content or attended an event that is closely related to what you do or what you offer. And you can build a sequence based off that. Calendar enrichment, there's kind of two components to this. One is having a calendar booking link. A lot of people are familiar with Calendly, and a lot of other tools and CRM systems have those calendar booking links built in to where they sync not only with your CRM, but also your own calendar. And then beyond that, having rich insights either through the submission form, the contact form, or also if you're doing cold outreach, being able to see in a quick glance who you're meeting with, what their title is, where your first contact was, things like that. That becomes more important when you have, booked meetings back to back and you don't always have time. Say someone booked a meeting 2 weeks ago and you forget the context of where you talked to them and you're scrambling to figure that out in the 10 minutes before a call. Calendar enrichment is the process of adding that directly to the booking meeting, so you don't have to scramble and look through your LinkedIn, your email, and figure out what you talked about and where you first met with them essentially. Data enrichment. In the past, you used to have really long contact forms to collect every part of data that you needed from anyone you're reaching out to. So that would be, job title, company, average revenue. You'd have to make people fill all of those leads in. Now, again, you can pay for a lot of different tools that have that data built into them, so you don't have to have people manually enter all of that data. And in some cases, if you just have a list of emails, for example, you can upload that and then for some kind of credit usage, validate the emails, and then also add information, say their LinkedIn profile, the company, and all the other firmographic and contact data that you can pull in. And that ties into contact data validation. Beyond that, you want to make sure that all of these have updated information so you're not wasting your time calling or emailing leads that basically that information is wrong because it's been outdated. And then integrations, ensuring that basically it can push easily whatever you're using for your lead generation side, that it can push to your CRM if it's not already included in your CRM, which your CRM is either your client or customer relationship management platform. So when you're actually reaching out to these leads, that's kind of the engagement component. So multi-channel, a lot of people are reaching out to brands and companies across multiple different inboxes. So for example, in my case, like I get leads. I have two businesses. I have one that's also an electronics repair business. I get ones from Yelp. I get ones from Google My Business. I get them on social. I get them through my website contact form. I get them over the phone. So one of the things that you want to look for a lot of times, if you aren't trying to check every single inbox and potentially missing leads, is finding a tool that unifies those into one inbox. That will really help your response rate with a lot of these. And then moving into social selling has become a lot more important, being active on a variety of platforms. Even if you aren't posting as yourself or your company, at least claiming those profiles and making sure they're up to date. That's super important. But if you are doing the outreach on that side, you can scale your efforts with personalized outreach, voice video messages, and AI assisted first touch messages. Those AI assisted copywriters, everyone's heard of ChatGPT. There are a bunch of different versions, and there are some that are sales enablement focused. So you can either use that to help build ideation for the sequences that you're creating, or potentially some of them are actually able to be integrated and, say, scrape the LinkedIn profile or one of their last posts to create a tailored sequence based on that. So these tools are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and you should evaluate your options to see if it might work for your use case. Because a lot of the sales enablement is basically removing those first couple touches and focusing on just picking up conversations once you get a response or a meeting booked. Part of that is using automated workflows. So much sales effort is wasted on kind of high level conversation, just follow ups, and basically having the same conversations over and over. Really, you should only be stepping in as a salesperson when that conversation is unique and when it needs your own kind of input aside from some canned response that you've used for a lot of different people. So if you see that your messages have a level of consistency, so for example, one that's really popular is if you reach out to someone and they're not the right person, and they refer you to someone else, you can have an automated sequence that if you reach out to them, they say they're not the right person, it automatically puts that next person in sequence and says, hey, a person referred me to you, you're the right contact. And that's something, if you were doing that manually, would take a really long time, especially if you're doing it across hundreds of companies every day. So those are the kind of workflows that you want to look for to make sure that you can automate as much as possible to where you're only having conversations that you really need to have. And then spam compliance is really important part of all of that, especially if you're using automations. So the biggest one that you want to look into, it's channel dependent, but canned spam has changed a lot of things. And also managing your volume. So you want to be familiar with what level of volume you can send. The worst thing you can do is you can set up a personal email and use your personal phone and just blast emails and call people all day. You will not get some kind of message that you're getting spam filtered, but I'll see it on the other side. Either your calls will stop going through, your emails will get high bounce rates, and there are tools to manage that and basically slowly ramp up your volume over time. So whatever tools you're using, especially if they're automated or semi-automated, you want to make sure that they're spam compliant. Analytics beyond that. So actually, once you're doing this outreach, especially if you have it automated or especially if you're running it across a whole team, you want to have some kind of unified analytics solution. A lot of times, if you have some kind of outreach tool, the analytics platform will be built into that. Otherwise, this is probably pipeline metrics that are measured within your CRM. So you want to have actionable insights to see if you need to change anything else. And these are some of the key metrics that you want to be looking for. So conversion rate, percentage of leads that become paying customers. You want to be looking at that to see again if the lead generation that you're doing is actually providing high quality leads. So if you get a high volume of leads, say like 1,000 leads, but you convert them at a very low rate and you get one conversion, you'd probably be better off creating a list of 100 leads where you convert 10 of them. So you want to pay attention to your conversion rate. That will give you an idea of whether your leads are good or not and how you might want to tweak that accordingly. You also want to measure your average deal size. This is something that you should be able to see at a glance in your CRM, and this is something that you should know by heart because this is something that you either want to increase prioritization for higher deal sizes, or monitor that closely to see if you can increase that over time. So for example, like Green Screen Repairs, the other business that I have as well, I know off the top of my head, and I can see it in my CRM that my average ticket value is $150 for electronics repair. For marketing, obviously, it's a good bit higher, but that's something that you should know at a glance because it also impacts your ability to do outreach and figure out how much you can spend to acquire that deal and what that payback period is for that acquisition cost. Um, so beyond that average deal size, you also want to combine that with average sales cycle length. So you want to figure out how long does it take to close one of these leads. Because if you have higher deal sizes that say take a year to close or more, and you could be closing a lot of smaller deals that would have the same amount of impact, that's something you want to measure. Um, and then lead response time, this is the most important part. I would say for small businesses, the metric that you probably want to try to hit is at least a response within 24 hours. That's pretty doable, even if you're doing it manually. As you grow over time, this is something that you want to really drive into the ground and try to get, basically within an hour, 2 hours, potentially even 30 minutes, depending on what kind of your industry you're in and how fast people make a purchasing decision, and also how likely they are to be calling around and comparing quotes. So especially if you're in some industry that is not particularly differentiated, again, for example, green screen repairs, most people call 5 or 6 shops. So basically, the entire thing that is driving results for that business is picking up the cell phone first ring, or at least responding within a few hours before anyone else does to secure that business. That becomes somewhat less important if you have very long deal cycles, but in general, you want to be the most responsive person that they're reaching out to so you can get potentially a quote out before anyone else does. Intelligence. So these are things that you are looking for while you're doing this outreach, and there are tools that can give you a lot of these things, or help you create them internally. So buying intent signals, prioritizing and tailoring your approach to leads who exhibit strong purchasing readiness. There are a lot of different ways to do this. A lot of tools with kind of the advent of AI have built a lot of different signals. So for example, if you're a company that is potentially looking for, say, CRM software, and you've engaged with 5 or 6 of HubSpot's ads, that's something that could be a buying intent signal. Another example would be Clearbit, a software where you can see how many people have visited your pricing page, say, versus your research pages. So if they've been visiting your blogs, they're probably in the research phase looking for more information about what you offer, and you should probably reach out with that intent to educate, versus if they're only hitting your pricing page, you probably want to reach out with the intent to close those people quickly and figure out what their budget are. So meeting people where they're at in the funnel and having signals that kind of show the prioritization and what phase they might be in that buying journey is really important. Monitoring job changes is something that's really underrated. This is both a good thing to target. So, say as a marketing agency, I might want to target companies that have just hired a new CMO because they're probably likely wanting to make a bunch of different changes on their website, their ad strategy. So that might be something where I would want to reach out to them. Another good one is if you have current clients and they have where you have a good relationship with that client and they have someone on their team that you've maybe may or may not have talked with, they go to a new company. That's something that you want to hit quickly because they already know you've already closed them before, and they might want to implement your solution the same way in a different company. So that's super super underrated, is monitoring job changes. Segmentation and personalization. I would say the biggest thing that I see a lot of companies mess up on their outreach is that it is not sufficiently segmented and personalized. It has basically no tailoring the message to whatever your particular industry is, whatever your particular use case is. So, general rule of thumb that I try to tell people is you should generally be working with a list that is less than 500 contacts with the level of personalization that you're going for. If it's wider than that, you are probably not sufficiently tailoring your message to the audience that you're trying to hit. So under 500 is a good rule of thumb. And then narrowing that down even more, or you could potentially be doing account-based marketing or account-based outreach where you're trying to hit specific companies. And in those cases, you want to be mapping out that buying committee, who is your introduction, who is your champion, and who is actually writing the check, and figuring out how you can hit those people in a very personalized way. Feedback loop integration. You want to be getting insights from your sales and analytics teams to make adjustments. So say people are not engaging with a particular messaging, or they drop off at various points in the sequence, or some salesperson has developed a template that is crushing it compared to everyone else. You can't see that unless you have good analytics built in and communication and regular reviews. There are lots of different tools where you can share sales templates across your whole team with customization fields. But that's something that you want to really make sure that the people who are winning and the sequences that are working, that is shared across your entire organization and implemented quickly. And AI copywriting ties into that. I kind of touched on that earlier, but there are a lot of different tools now that you can use either to create the sequences or even kind of do this on the fly, where it pulls in dynamic fields based on their profile, based on a recent post, a lot of different information that you can use to tailor that even more. Um, Whereas sales used to kind of be one to one, now it can be one to few or even one to many if you set these things up properly. Deliverability. I would say this is the number one thing that most businesses need to pay attention to. If you pay attention to nothing else, this is what you need to pay attention to. This is where the game has changed. And if you, for example, have been a salesperson for 20 years, it used to be the case across a lot of different channels that more dials, more touches means more business. And that is not the case anymore. And you will not always get notifications on when your sales outreach is breaking, because Google is not going to tell you how to beat their spam filters, because if they did, spammers would just go around it. So when you mess these things up, you will never get a red flashing light. You will never get some kind of notification. You will just notice that you are not able to connect with people that you're trying to connect with. So volume is not the game anymore. You need to have your deliverability dialed in. So on social, that looks like maintaining a consistent and active presence on social platforms and being mindful of automated action and messaging limits. So for example, on LinkedIn, you can only send about 400 connection requests a month before you start to get marked as spam. They also have separate inboxes where it's your focused inbox and your primary that includes general spam messages. You want to figure out where you're hitting, and LinkedIn actually, which is probably the tool that a lot of you are going to use, LinkedIn has a tool to measure the health of your profile to figure out how you might be able to improve that, to improve the deliverability of your messages. Email is probably the platform that most people are going to use. So a couple things that we're going to touch on there. You want to use warm up. So if you have a new inbox that you haven't used before, say you just launched your website, you have a new company email, and you cannot go straight into sending 500 emails a day. Otherwise, you will be marked as spam. So warm up is basically slowly ramping that volume over time, oftentimes with automated sending back and forth between a network to increase that volume. It's kind of difficult to explain, but I could show you in practice. But it's basically slowly ramping up your volume over time rather than immediately launching into 500, 1,000 emails a day, for example. Domain health monitoring is what you use to monitor that health of your outreach. There are industry spam lists that are through your ISP, and you can monitor these lists to make sure that you aren't being marked as spam. But a lot of people don't have this monitoring in place, so they never have any sense of when they need to improve their outreach because they're consistently getting marked as spam. So you want to have domain health monitoring in place if you are doing a lot of outreach under your own email. Inbox rotation is another option. So again, for example, LinkedIn, you get 400 connection requests a month. Email, you can send a lot more volume, but one of the ways that you can increase your volume is spreading it across multiple inboxes. So rather than through your own, personal company email, sending 1,000 emails, you can have, say my email is, at hotbutton.io. I can have one that's try hot button. I could have variations of my own name. And if you spread that across multiple inboxes, you can send higher volume without risking getting filtered as spam. So that's inbox rotation. And then authentication is one of the most important things for deliverability. So there are really kind of three key parts to that. There's your sender policy framework, there's your domain keys identified mail, and then your domain-based authentication reporting and conformance. That is a huge rabbit hole to get into, but basically you want to look through and have those three things with whoever is setting up your email or setting up your outreach tool to make sure that they get all of that sorted out to maximize your deliverability via email. Phone, I would actually, at this point in 2023, I would recommend not jumping straight into cold calling. You should be doing several other touches before you're just dialing people in, because auto dialers, a lot of this has changed with CAN spam laws, and it's very, very easy to run afoul of these and rack up very expensive fines if you don't do this right. So phone, I would really kind of recommend only doing that at lower volumes, where you've probably also had a touch point either via email or social and say they've at least read a message from you. So phones, in my opinion, should really be used for what I would call lukewarm outreach, where you've had some other point of contact and you're just trying to get them on the phone. Because if you're constantly cold calling people, you will not connect at a certain point, and it is very difficult to reverse that damage to your business phone line. And if you're constantly changing your business phone line, it becomes difficult to make sure it's updated everywhere. Like I had to do this recently because my phone provider, they were not CAN spam compliant on the texts and they stopped going through, and I had to update all of my marketing material. I had to update the website, the business cards, all those kind of things. So phones, I would really lean into social and email first and try as much as you can phones to have low volume and kind of more lukewarm outreach. But for all of these, frequent monitoring and analytics are essential to adjust that. And in all of these, prioritize building and maintaining trust, high engagement rates, positive interactions. The easiest thing to tell people is that you should be focused on building relationships, not necessarily pitch slapping and trying to sell everybody. So this gets more effective if you actually put in the time and effort to build a relationship, especially before you cold call people. Pipeline management. Most of this is going to be done within the CRM, and we could talk more about that. I can probably answer questions about this or jump into it more later if we have time. But a lot of this is based on selecting the right CRM for your use case. So your CRM, depending on the industry that you're in, should have a lot of this tailored to whatever your deal looks like. So green screen repairs, that's ticket management. For marketing agency, I use HubSpot, and that has, Kanban deal flow. Depending on the industry that you're in and how you send out, quotes and manage deals, you want that to be aligned with the CRM that you pick. So pipeline management, all of these will have the same features. Visualization, you want to be able to see quickly, where are people in your sales cycle? Are they a lead? Have they been contacted? Are they the right person? Are they close one? Are they close loss? Being able to see where people are in your entire pipeline is very important. And part of the reason that is important is for forecasting, where you can predict your future sales based on the current status and flow of leads. This impacts your ability to make investments into marketing, in hiring, in buying inventory. You need to have accurate forecasting to figure out what kind of budget you're working with for the rest of the year. So that's why the visualization and forecasting are super important. Another aspect, especially on the sequence side, is bottleneck identification. So figuring out which stages in the sales pipeline leads frequently fall off. So say your quoting is really slow, or you don't have a follow-up on that after you send the quote, or say you have a particular segment of the sequence that isn't working well, you want to be able to identify and resolve those bottlenecks. And part of the reason that you can only identify those bottlenecks is through visualization, which is why it's so important. Automation, that's another part that is going to assist with those bottlenecks and also continue to push people through the pipeline. You want to have integration of tools and software that systemize your follow-up processes. So one of the easiest ones, this is especially with businesses, and this is more after close one deals, but something as simple as having invoice reminders to say your invoice, when you send it, it has to be um, approved within 7 days, and then if it isn't paid, it has a follow-up sequence. It has, 2 reminders for the invoice, and then it has, say, an email drip sequence if they're delinquent beyond that. A lot of these automations you want to build in so you aren't manually having to send people reminders, especially when the steps are consistent. If the steps are consistent and repeatable, you can automate it. And then beyond that, the biggest thing that I see a lot of companies not invest in very well is training. Training is super important. Even if you're hiring skilled salespeople, they still have to learn your own systems. They still should be working with your entire, sales and marketing team to develop playbooks and understand which messages are working and which ones are not. So basically, you want to make sure that you have consolidated playbooks and sequence templates that are easily modified and shared. So if you're sharing sequences that are working well across your organization, they should not be hard coded values, for example. So if you want to be able to swap in fields like the prospect name, prospect company, the person who's doing the outreach, their name and their calendar link, those should be coded in with dynamic fields. So it's easy to push that template across your organization. And there's lots of ones that do that. Sales Loft is a very prominent example of that, where it makes it easy to create and save a template, oftentimes even within your email inbox, and then push it to your entire team if it's one that's working well. And then this is my contact information on here. You can see one of the things that I have on there is the booking link. That's something that I always recommend having because it allows people to kind of self-serve book time rather than playing email tag. But a lot of people have both options. So typically the way that I send my own booking link is, let me know what date times work well for you. Otherwise, if you want to save some back and forth, book some time on my booking link. And if you give people the self-serve option to do that, oftentimes you will increase your rates because a lot of times people drop off in conversations when you spend too much back and forth with time gaps trying to schedule a time. That's where I see a lot of people drop the ball. So contact information on there, Robert Jones. Tell me if I'm being too promotional there, but that is one of the steps where you can get in touch with me, and it's something that I recommend implementing for your own business as well. And with that, any questions if we want to open to that? But G2 is one where you can evaluate a lot of different software options. I'd recommend that for shopping around CRM solutions, any of these automated outreach tools. But what works for a lot of businesses, HubSpot is a pretty solid entry level SMB CRM system. They have a lot of these automations built in. One of the ones that I really like from HubSpot is that you can see when people have opened your emails. And that's really helpful, not only to be seeing how many people have opened your emails and not responded, so you can figure out if they need additional touches. But it also records calls to the contacts that you've reached out to. So call recording and email open rates are things that you want to look for. You can buy tools that do those individually, but HubSpot has that built in. And then on the automated outreach side, one that has the company filtering, that has the data, that has the automated outreach flows, that has kind of that whole package. One that I use is called Ample Market. That's the one that I have a partnership through my agency, and that's the one that I recommend and use for my clients. Another more cost-effective version of that same tool is Apollo.io. I'll put all these links in the chat, or I'll send them to Robert to make sure everyone gets them afterwards. But basically, you can, generally speaking, buy either the entire package of software that does all of those things that's right for your use case. And you usually want to shop and kind of do your homework, or have an agency, assist you with that selection. Or you can buy each one of those steps individually. So I could buy just an email warm-up tool. I could buy just the data component. I could buy just the email outreach component. But Ample Market and Apollo have both of those built in. And then CRM systems, I would start with HubSpot. Otherwise, I would look for one that's specific to your industry. So I have Repair Desk for my repair shop. If you're a tax professional, you can use one that's called Canopy. If you're in the service industry, like HVAC plumbing, you could probably use something like Service Titan or Jobber. You typically want to be looking for something that is specific to your industry, because they will have a lot of these templates and automations set up and ready to go, rather than you having to build them all yourself with something like Zoho or HubSpot or Salesforce. That's more flexible, but it requires a lot more work. And if you are in a business that has already been invented before, then it's probably in your best interest to find a CRM that's built for your industry. Well, I would say, well, with healthcare, you have some different requirements. So healthcare, you're usually not using a CRM, you're using, an EMR or an EHR, which is, electronic records management. I actually used to have an agency that was specific for lifestyle medicine providers. So they kind of have a different suite of tools that they'd be using. But really for something like, say you're, a chiropractor or any kind of doctor, a lot of times what you're doing is demand capture. So what's going to be most important for you is having your directory listings created and updated. So that's, Google My Business and Yelp for the generic ones, but with the more specific ones, things like ZocDoc, there's a bunch of different ones that are specific to the healthcare industries that you want to have that set up. And that goes back to having that unified inbox. So when people request a quote or request a visit or request directions, that those automations happen quickly with the follow-ups. And then beyond that, though, if you're talking specifically about engagements from social media, that goes back to the tools that I talked about with like the scraping, for example. So Ample Market, if you're talking specifically about LinkedIn, you have an extension where I can say, there's a post that was about in the medical field, for example, about how you can improve your diet, and say you're a dietitian. You could scrape and put all those people into a sequence based on, hey, I saw you like this post from X person about eating healthy. That's a service that we offer. Is that something that you'd like to have more of a discussion about? Obviously, you probably want to be more sophisticated than that. But having tools that can scrape social, that you can create a sequence based on engagements in a single post, those are things that you'd want to look for. The biggest thing that you want to start with, pretty much after you have, say your brand and your website, or potentially even before your website, is the CRM. So when you pick your CRM, a lot of these tools have an onboarding team. So just paying for the software, a lot of CRMs, at least basic CRMs, are somewhere, between 25 and $100 a month for like a single seat. So like Repair Desk, for example, for me is $75 a month, and then HubSpot is actually less. HubSpot to start out is like 35 a month. So I would say start with the CRM. So depending on whatever business you have, go on G2, for example, and look up CRMs that are specific for your industry and your business, and sign up for it. And then sign up, usually a lot of times when you sign up with any CRM provider, someone from their customer success team will reach out to you and schedule a time that kind of shows you a platform overview, how to add onto it. And then some of these platforms actually have the ability for you, sometimes you have to pay extra for it, but they can help you upload all of the existing deals and contacts that you have. So the number one thing I would start with is get the CRM first, and then after you have the CRM, try to make sure that all your contacts in there are accurate, your deals in there are accurate, and then beyond that, slowly chip away at those other metrics. So once you have everything in there and the data is accurate, you can see your average deal size, you can see your response time, you can see all those things. Once that data is good, then try to optimize those things over time. So the CRM is the biggest place that you want to start. The foundational components of sales that you want to have sorted out. And part of the reason why, as an agency, I started focusing on sales enablement is because something that I say a lot is a lot of people reach out to a marketing agency when they really need sales help. So, if I say I'm a pure play marketing company, I just do advertising, and I run a campaign that's, really dialed in and successful. It's to a form that works, and you suddenly have all these leads, but it takes you, 2 weeks to follow up. You don't have the data from them. Those are the things that you want to have dialed in. The CRM is going to help with that. So, um, basically, yeah, you want to use all of those as a checklist to dial in your own sales system. And that kind of ties back to the general marketing and sales presentation that I did last time, which, Robert, I can get anyone a copy of that who wants that as well, and walk through that. But typically,
Okay.
to your point, what you need to have dialed in first is, your ICP. So who exactly are you trying to hit? What's in, their firmographic data, their contact data, the job titles that you're looking for, and then what is the unique selling point that makes you different from everyone else. And what's great about sales is typically you do, in my opinion, you do sales outreach first before you do marketing, because marketing, if I'm running a lead gen campaign, for example, I don't necessarily get feedback from people who are scrolling past the ad of what they did or didn't like about it. Sometimes if you have comments on it, you can see that. But what's great about sales is you can test a lot of different messaging to see what starts to work, and then that can translate to your marketing strategies. So basically, that's what I'd be looking for is if you don't have a formal strategy, try to define what your ICP is, which is your ideal customer profile, your USP, which is your unique selling point, and then test messaging at lower volume that you can handle within your CRM to make sure that handoff is accurate. The conversations you're having are of good quality. Those are leads that are a good fit that have a high likelihood of closing, and optimize that slowly until you can ramp up the volume and either automate it more, or potentially hire people to manage that pipeline. Sometimes people are reaching out for a service that they're not quite ready for, and marketing, in my opinion, marketing, you don't turn that on at all until you have all of the brand components sorted out, a mission, vision, your unique selling point, who you're trying to hit. That all should get translated to your website. You should have that locked in before you build the website, because then the website speaks to all of those things, and then you have the sales process built out, and then you turn on the marketing. So it's important to get all those done in sequence, and I have all those mapped out in the previous presentation, which goes over what you need to look for and what I would call the foundational assets, the digital assets, and then moving into sales and marketing, and which activities are paid and which ones are not. That's all included in that one, so I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of that one.
Thank you.
And we've got a question in the chat box.
Yeah, so likening the CRM to the EHR. So what I would say on that side, again, I previously worked with a lot of doctors and health clinics. So the EMR or EHR, a lot of times those are focused on just managing patient health data. So what I would look for on that side is one that also has some of those automations built in. So what a lot of doctors we worked with were looking for is they wanted something that could plug in and have attribution. Say if they're running ads, we can see where this new patient sent a request from. Was it a Google ad? Was it a Yelp listing? Wherever that inbound inquiry came from. And then a lot of them, they wanted review and reputation management, which is at the end of your visit, say a request for a Google review, for example, is sent within a day or two, and there's a couple follow-ups for that. That's something that's really important. And in the medical field, I would say you need to focus on review and reputation management, because what we found is a lot of doctors suffer from getting bad reviews from things that are out of their control. Like, for example, someone visits you and you take insurance, but you don't take their insurance, or their insurance didn't cover something and it was very expensive. That's not necessarily your fault. But what you do to be resistant to that is have that built in, ideally to your EMR or EHR solution, or have something that is integrated with it to proactively address those concerns before they turn into bad reviews. So in the medical space, some of those are hybrid solutions. Otherwise, you want to look for one that integrates to your EMR, or at least can pass the data back efficiently, and in one that's HIPAA compliant and handles data with the necessary amount of security that is required for your field, which can vary based on industry. But healthcare is a little bit more stringent, so you would want ones that are specifically built for healthcare outreach and lead management.